Fix this engine and I'll marry you. Lauren's voice sliced through the boardroom, dripping with mockery. Laughter erupted, investors sneering at the black mechanic in greasy overalls, until Anthony's hands touched the machine, and silence swallowed the room. That moment of stillness would be remembered for years in Harriman, New York. But the story didn't begin there. It began with two lives on opposite ends of the same small town. Lauren Howard woke each morning in a glass mansion that overlooked Harriman like a queen over her kingdom. Her empire stretched from skyscrapers in Manhattan to high-tech labs across the Hudson. To her board, she was untouchable. The Ice Queen CEO, a woman who never faltered, never softened, never let her guard down. Every detail of her life was precision, her hair sleek, her words sharpened like knives, her presence commanding. But power is a lonely crown. Lauren's victories felt hollow. She had rooms filled with awards, yet none filled with laughter. She spoke to hundreds daily, but never to someone who really saw her. Her father's shadow loomed in every success, his voice, cold and demanding, always reminding her that anything less than perfection was weakness. Across town, Anthony Davies's mornings looked nothing like hers. His world was grease-stained coveralls, clanging wrenches, and the scent of oil that clung to his skin long after he left the garage. In Harriman, he was known as the guy who can fix anything, a genius with machines but invisible to the people who mattered. He had once dreamed of being an engineer, building engines that could change the world, but when his mother got sick and bills piled up, Anthony traded his scholarship dreams for long shifts at a mechanic's shop. His brilliance was hidden under dirt and sweat, dismissed by those who never looked beyond the surface. Yet in his silence, Anthony carried a quiet fire. He never complained, never sought pity. He knew his worth even if the world didn't. Fate, though, has a way of smashing worlds together. Lauren's company was preparing to unveil its newest engine, an innovation meant to secure billions in future contracts. The unveiling was to happen in Harriman, inside the company's sleek headquarters. Investors flew in, cameras were ready, and Lauren prepared to cement her dominance in the industry. But engines don't bow to pride. That morning, when the polished prototype failed to start, panic rippled through the room. Investors muttered. Technicians scrambled. Lauren's perfect world cracked as doubt whispered in the air, and standing quietly at the back, fixing a flickering light bulb, was Anthony Davies. His eyes narrowed, not in mockery, but in instinct. He could hear what was wrong with the engine from across the room, the kind of flaw no corporate engineer would notice, but every mechanic would. When Anthony stepped forward, suggesting he could help, laughter rolled like thunder. A billionaire CEO, investors in suits, and a black mechanic in greasy coveralls. To them it was absurd. Lauren's lips curled into a cold smirk. Her pride stung, her control slipping. She struck with cruelty masked as humor. Fix this engine and I'll marry you. The room erupted in laughter, mocking both him and the very idea of someone like him standing beside someone like her. But Anthony didn't laugh. His jaw tightened, his silence heavier than words. And then he placed his hands on the machine. That was the moment the laughter stopped. That was the moment silence swallowed the room. Anthony's hands hovered over the machine, his palms darkened with grease, his knuckles scarred from years of hard work. Every eye in the boardroom was glued to him, half with ridicule, half with curiosity. "Is he serious?" One investor scoffed, shaking his head. "He'll probably make it worse." Another chuckled, sipping his coffee. "A mechanic touching a multi-million-dollar prototype. This is comedy gold." But Anthony wasn't listening. His mind drowned out the mockery. He heard the machine as if it was speaking to him, the faint clink of loose gears, the strained whir that didn't belong, the silence in parts where rhythm should flow. He bent lower, inspecting every detail, his focus absolute. Lauren leaned back in her leather chair, her manicured fingers drumming against the polished table. She wanted him to fail. She needed him to fail. If this mechanic somehow succeeded, it would expose a crack in the empire she had built, an empire constructed on the belief that only the elite deserved a seat at her table. "Do you need a toolbox or a magic wand?" she drawled, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The room chuckled again. Anthony didn't answer. His silence was louder than her mockery. With calm precision, he pulled a simple wrench from his back pocket. No high-tech equipment, no engineers with clipboards, just a man and his tools. He tightened a bolt, adjusted a valve, wiped his hands across his overalls, and then did something no one expected. He closed his eyes and listened to the engine as he turned the key. The machine coughed, shook, stuttered, and then roared to life. The sound filled the boardroom like a lion's victory cry. Investors jumped to their feet, gasps echoing against the glass walls. Phones were raised, cameras clicked, voices overlapped in shock and awe. Lauren froze. The smirk slipped from her lips, her posture stiffening as the reality hit. The man she mocked had just done the unthinkable. Anthony straightened, wiping grease from his hands. His eyes lifted slowly, meeting hers. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. His silence was a challenge louder than any words. The boardroom erupted, questions flying, investors praising, engineers scrambling to understand how he had fixed what they couldn't. But all Anthony saw was Lauren, and all Lauren felt was something she hadn't felt in years: loss of control. For the first time in her career, she was not the one commanding the room. And now, dear listener, let me pause here for a moment, because if you're still watching, you're hooked. You felt the sting of Lauren's mockery, and you felt the triumph of Anthony's hands bringing that machine back to life. But let me ask you this. Are you really going to watch all of this unfold and not subscribe? Think about it. Anthony was humiliated, underestimated, laughed at, and yet he silenced a room full of billionaires. If you can't find the courage to hit that red button after feeling this, then maybe you're no better than those investors who doubted him. Don't just watch. Prove you're rooting for the underdog. Subscribe now. Back in the boardroom, Lauren forced herself to clap. A slow, deliberate clap that was more insult than praise. "Well," she said coldly, "I suppose even broken clocks are right twice a day." But even her words couldn't erase the truth everyone had just witnessed. The mechanic had done the impossible. And for the first time, Lauren Howard felt the ground shift beneath her perfect, polished world. The boardroom buzzed like a hive. Investors swarmed Anthony, peppering him with questions. How did you do it? Was it luck? Can you put this into a report? Anthony stood awkwardly among them, his tall frame towering, but his presence still somehow overlooked. They weren't seeing him. They were seeing a spectacle, a trick, a mechanic who had outshined their engineers for a split second. And at the head of the room, Lauren Howard's smile was stretched too tight, too sharp, hiding the storm brewing inside her. She dismissed the board with a wave of her hand. "Thank you, gentlemen. That will be all. We'll evaluate Mr. Davies's contribution later." Contribution. The word stung. Anthony's jaw tightened. He had just saved her multi-million-dollar deal, silenced a room full of doubters, and she reduced it to a contribution. As the investors filed out, Anthony turned to leave, too. His silence carried more dignity than any protest could. "Wait." Lauren's voice stopped him. He turned, his eyes steady, unreadable. She walked toward him, heels clicking against the marble floor. Her expression softened just slightly, though pride still held it in place. "You embarrassed me," she said quietly, her voice low enough to not echo. Anthony raised a brow. "Embarrassed you? I fixed your engine." "You fixed it in front of everyone," she snapped, crossing her arms. "Do you have any idea what that looks like, that I, Lauren Howard, needed a janitor in overalls to rescue my company?" The words cut, more than she realized. Anthony exhaled slowly, his voice calm but edged with fire. "You don't know me, Miss Howard. Don't mistake your pride for my purpose. I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I was just doing what I know." Lauren faltered, just for a second. His calmness disarmed her, but her pride roared back. "Don't let this go to your head. You're not part of this world. You don't belong here." The silence between them stretched like a blade. Anthony finally nodded once, his face unreadable. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't belong here, but neither does the truth, apparently." And with that, he walked out. That night, Anthony sat in his small apartment above the garage, staring at the grease on his hands. He wasn't angry at fixing the engine. He was angry at himself for caring what she thought, for letting her words matter. Lauren, meanwhile, poured herself a glass of wine in her mansion, staring out at Harriman's twinkling lights. Why did his silence bother her so much? Why did the look in his eyes linger even after he was gone? She told herself it was irritation. Nothing more. But deep down she knew. Something had shifted. Both resisted the truth in their own ways. Lauren clung tighter to her crown of pride, unwilling to admit the mechanic had shaken her armor. Anthony buried himself deeper in his work, telling himself he had no place in her world. Two hearts, both wounded, both drawn, yet both retreating. 2 days later, the Harriman headquarters was a battlefield of tension. Investors wanted answers. How had a mechanic done what a team of corporate engineers could not? Whispers spread, board members pressed for details, and pressure mounted on Lauren Howard to explain. Her solution was swift, precise, and calculated: keep Anthony close. Not as an equal, but as a temporary tool. She summoned him back. Anthony resisted at first. "I already did my part," he muttered to his boss at the garage. But when the company's car rolled up and an official summons came with it, he couldn't refuse, not without risking his livelihood. And so, Anthony found himself walking back into the glass towers of Lauren's empire, this time not as a silent janitor or ignored handyman, but as someone the board wanted to hear from. The first meeting was icy. Lauren sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, her tailored suit immaculate, her tone clipped. Anthony sat across from her, grease-stained notebook in hand, looking like an intruder in a cathedral. "Mr. Davies," she began, her voice cool as ice, "you'll be temporarily consulting on the prototype. Strictly technical, nothing more." Anthony met her gaze without flinching. "I didn't ask to be here." "Good," she replied, leaning back in her chair. "Then we're in agreement." Their words clashed like steel, but beneath the sharpness was a flicker neither could deny. A strange pull, an awareness that unsettled them both. Days turned into a rhythm neither of them wanted but couldn't escape. Anthony arrived early, working with the prototype long before the executives trickled in. Lauren observed from a distance, arms crossed, pretending to critique but secretly watching his hands. There was something hypnotic in the way he worked, methodical, unshaken, as if the machines trusted him more than people did. She hated that she noticed. Anthony, for his part, bristled at her presence. Her sharp comments grated on him, her cold stares pressed against him. But every now and then he caught her looking not with disdain, but with curiosity, almost softness. One evening, long after the board had left, Anthony was tightening the last bolt when Lauren walked in, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "You're still here?" she asked. "I work until the work is done," he said simply. She smirked. "Not many people have that discipline." Anthony looked at her, his eyes steady. Not many people mock someone offering help. The words landed heavier than he expected. Lauren opened her mouth, then shut it. Pride warred with something else in her chest. For the first time in years, she couldn't find a cutting reply. The silence that followed was thick, charged, and strangely intimate. For all their resistance, for all their walls, proximity was wearing them down. Lauren found herself drawn to the quiet strength she had dismissed. Anthony found himself unnerved by the flickers of humanity behind her icy mask. They didn't say it. They didn't show it. But deep down, both knew. The lines between mockery and fascination were beginning to blur. The nights grew longer in Harriman's glass towers. Anthony worked quietly, his broad hands steady as they moved over bolts and wires. Lauren often lingered in the background, pretending to check reports, but in truth she was watching him. It happened late one evening. Anthony wiped his brow, grease streaking across his cheek. He leaned back against the workbench, staring at the humming engine. For once, he didn't look like the unshakable man she had mocked. He looked tired, worn. Lauren found herself asking softly, "How did you learn to do all this?" He glanced at her, his expression unreadable at first, Then, with a quiet sigh, he spoke. My mum. She worked 2 jobs, raised me and my sisters. Couldn't afford to send me to college, but she taught me grit. I got a scholarship once, for engineering. Full ride. But when she got sick, I had to choose. I stayed, worked, kept food on the table, fixed cars instead of building them. Lauren felt her throat tighten. This wasn't the story of a janitor or a mechanic. It was the story of a man who sacrificed everything for family. Anthony chuckled dryly, shaking his head. Guess life had other plans. For once, Lauren had no clever retort. She only whispered, I'm sorry. The words felt foreign on her tongue. Apologies weren't part of Lauren Howard's world. Yet here, in the quiet hum of the workshop, she meant it. Anthony studied her for a long moment. What about you? He asked, surprising her. She stiffened. What about me? You wear that mask real well, he said. But I've been around enough broken engines to know when something's rattling inside. The words cut deep because they were true. Lauren looked away, her glassy reflection staring back from the engine's chrome surface. My father built this empire, taught me that softness was weakness, that if I ever wanted respect, I had to be harder, sharper, colder than the men who underestimated me. She exhaled, her shoulders trembling almost imperceptibly. I won everything, and lost myself along the way. For the first time in years, Lauren's voice cracked. Anthony didn't mock her. He didn't smirk. He simply nodded, as though he understood. The silence that followed was not empty. It was healing. And if you're watching this right now, let me pause and ask you something. How many people in your life do you know only from the surface? How many Laurens and Anthonys are you quick to judge without knowing their scars? And yet, here you are, feeling this story, watching walls break, watching hearts crack open. So tell me, why are you just watching? Why haven't you subscribed yet? You think these stories come easy? No, they come from truth, from pain, from fire. If you can feel this, if you can see them, don't be a ghost. Subscribe. Be part of this journey. Lauren wiped at her eyes quickly, regaining her composure. Don't read too much into this, she said sharply, as if ashamed of her own vulnerability. Anthony half smiled. Don't worry. Your secret's safe with me. And for the first time since they met, there was no mockery, no pride, no mask. Just 2 people standing in their wounds, closer than they ever thought they could be. The next evening, the workshop was quieter than usual. The board had left earlier, engineers were long gone, and only the low hum of fluorescent lights filled the space. Anthony was bent over the engine, his brow furrowed, muttering calculations under his breath. Lauren entered without her usual heels, without the steel mask of the CEO. Just flats, a loose blouse, and her hair tied back. Anthony glanced up, caught off guard. For the first time, she didn't look like Lauren Howard, the billionaire CEO. She looked like Lauren, the woman. You're still here? He asked. I could ask you the same, she said, smirking faintly. Anthony shrugged. Engines don't fix themselves. She walked closer, watching his hands move. Show me, she said suddenly. He raised a brow. Show you? How it works. The engine. Teach me. Anthony hesitated. He had taught apprentices before, but the idea of teaching her felt absurd. Yet something in her eyes was different. Curiosity, sincerity. So he stepped aside, guiding her hand toward the wrench. No, not like that, he said, moving behind her. His hand covered hers, steadying her grip. The closeness startled them both. Lauren's heart skipped, Anthony's breath caught. The air grew charged. Together, they turned the bolt. When it clicked into place, Lauren laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a cold, strategic one, but a real laugh, warm, soft, unguarded. Anthony froze, stunned by the sound. You're laughing at a bolt? He teased. She grinned. I haven't touched a tool in my life. It feels strangely satisfying. Anthony shook his head, chuckling. Maybe there's hope for you after all. For the next hour, they worked side by side. She asked questions. He answered patiently, sometimes playfully. When she struggled, he teased. when he grew too serious, she poked fun. The rhythm was easy, almost natural. At one point she smeared grease on her cheek by accident. Anthony noticed and chuckled. "What?" she demanded. "Nothing," he said, smirking. "Just, you've got war paint now." Lauren touched her cheek, then laughed again, shaking her head. "Do not tell the board I look like this." Anthony grinned. "Your secret's safe with me." Again. The walls that had defined them, the billionaire and the mechanic, the ice queen and the underdog, blurred in that workshop. For a moment, they weren't CEO and employee. They weren't rich and poor. They were just two people, sharing space, sharing warmth, daring to trust. Lauren caught herself watching him as he tightened another bolt, noticing the steadiness of his hands, the quiet strength in his eyes. Anthony in turn noticed how different she looked when she wasn't armored by pride, her smile, her laugh, the softness she tried to hide. Neither said it, but both felt it. The night ended with the engine purring smoothly, a steady hum filling the air. They stood side by side, listening in silence. "It's beautiful," Lauren whispered. Anthony looked at her, not the machine. "Yeah, it is." Their eyes met. For a heartbeat it felt inevitable, but neither moved. Not yet. The days that followed were fragile, delicate, like glass waiting to shatter. Lauren and Anthony worked together with an unspoken closeness, but in a world built on pride and appearances, peace never lasts long. It happened in the boardroom. Lauren stood before a crowd of investors, presenting the newly stabilized engine. Anthony was there too, standing in the back, quietly satisfied. He didn't need credit. He knew the truth. But then an investor asked, "And what of the mechanic? The janitor who fixed the machine? Are you considering bringing him into the company?" The room chuckled lightly. It was meant as a joke, but Anthony's eyes flicked toward Lauren, waiting, hoping. Lauren's smile never faltered. Her voice, cool and sharp, cut through the air. "Anthony Davies is a skilled worker, nothing more. He got lucky that day. Let's not confuse luck with genius." The words slammed into Anthony like a punch to the gut. He froze. The very woman who had shared her past with him, who had laughed with grease on her cheek, had just belittled him in front of the people who mocked him most. Lauren's eyes met his for a fraction of a second. She saw the betrayal in his gaze, the crack of something breaking, but she couldn't stop herself. Pride held her tongue. Anthony's voice was low but searing. "Nothing more, huh? Guess that's all I'll ever be to you." The room fell silent. He walked out without another word. That night, Anthony sat in his apartment, fists clenched, heart pounding. He had trusted her, let her in where no one else had been allowed, and she turned him into a joke again. Lauren, alone in her glass mansion, replayed the moment over and over. She told herself it was necessary, protecting her image, preserving her control. But beneath the excuses, she felt the hollow ache of loss. For the first time, she realized what it meant to win the world and lose the one person who truly saw her. And now, if you're still watching this, let me be blunt. How many times in your life have you been Anthony? Overlooked, humiliated, reduced to nothing more? You feel that pain right now, don't you? You're nodding because you know what it's like. So why are you just sitting there? Why haven't you subscribed yet? If Anthony's struggle hit you in the chest, if Lauren's betrayal made your stomach twist, then don't just watch in silence. Prove you care. Prove you're not like those investors who only laughed. Hit subscribe, because stories like this aren't just told, they're lived. Lauren wept that night, not out of weakness, but out of the terrifying realization that she had destroyed the only real connection she'd ever had. And Anthony? He decided he was done being a punchline. The fragile bond they had built had shattered into pieces, and neither knew if it could ever be rebuilt. The days that followed were fragile, delicate, like glass waiting to shatter. Lauren and Anthony worked together with an unspoken closeness, but in a world built on pride and appearances, peace never lasts long. It happened in the boardroom. Lauren stood before a crowd of investors, presenting the newly stabilized engine. Anthony was there too, standing in the back, quietly satisfied. He didn't need credit. He knew the truth. But then an investor asked, "And what of the mechanic? The janitor who fixed the machine? Are you considering bringing him into the company?" The room chuckled lightly. It was meant as a joke, but Anthony's eyes flicked toward Lauren, waiting, hoping. Lauren's smile never faltered. Her voice, cool and sharp, cut through the air. "Anthony Davies is a skilled worker, nothing more. He got lucky that day. Let's not confuse luck with genius." The words slammed into Anthony like a punch to the gut. He froze. The very woman who had shared her past with him, who had laughed with grease on her cheek, had just belittled him in front of the people who mocked him most. Lauren's eyes met his for a fraction of a second. She saw the betrayal in his gaze, the crack of something breaking, but she couldn't stop herself. Pride held her tongue. Anthony's voice was low but searing. "Nothing more, huh? Guess that's all I'll ever be to you." The room fell silent. He walked out without another word. That night, Anthony sat in his apartment, fists clenched, heart pounding. He had trusted her, let her in where no one else had been allowed, and she turned him into a joke again. Lauren, alone in her glass mansion, replayed the moment over and over. She told herself it was necessary, protecting her image, preserving her control. But beneath the excuses, she felt the hollow ache of loss. For the first time, she realized what it meant to win the world and lose the one person who truly saw her. And now, if you're still watching this, let me be blunt. How many times in your life have you been Anthony? Overlooked, humiliated, reduced to nothing more. You feel that pain right now, don't you? You're nodding because you know what it's like, so why are you just sitting there? Why haven't you subscribed yet? If Anthony's struggle hit you in the chest, if Lauren's betrayal made your stomach twist, then don't just watch in silence. Prove you care. Prove you're not like those investors who only laughed. Hit subscribe, because stories like this aren't just told, they're lived. Lauren wept that night, not out of weakness, but out of the terrifying realization that she had destroyed the only real connection she'd ever had. And Anthony? He decided he was done being a punchline. The fragile bond they had built had shattered into pieces, and neither knew if it could ever be rebuilt. Anthony saw the message at midnight. 3 simple words glowing on his cracked phone screen. "I need you." He stared at it for a long time, jaw clenched, heart pounding. He wanted to ignore it. He wanted to protect his pride. But something in those words pierced through his defenses. The next morning, Anthony walked into the headquarters of Howard Enterprises, not in greasy overalls but in a pressed shirt, carrying a notebook full of sketches and diagrams he had worked on through sleepless nights. When he entered the boardroom, the same investors who had mocked him fell silent. Lauren Howard stood at the head of the table, her usual armor of confidence in place, but when her eyes met his, the mask cracked. "Mr. Davies," one board member said sharply, "we weren't expecting—" "Sit down," Lauren interrupted. Her voice wavered, but only slightly. She gestured toward Anthony. "He has something to show us." Anthony laid out his work, an improved design for the prototype, one that not only fixed its flaws, but optimized it beyond what the company's engineers had achieved. His voice was steady, his explanations clear. By the time he finished, the investors were nodding, murmuring approval. The man they had laughed at days ago now commanded their respect. And Lauren? She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, not as a tool, not as a mechanic, but as the man who had silenced a room with his brilliance and broken down the walls around her heart. When the meeting ended, Lauren didn't hesitate. She walked straight to him, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. "Anthony, that day, I mocked you. I humiliated you. And yet, you did the unthinkable. Not just with that engine, but with me. You broke through walls I swore no one could touch, and if you'll have me, if you'll trust me again, I meant what I said, but this time, without mockery." The room went quiet. Her eyes glistened. "Fix this, and I'll marry you." But this time she wasn't talking about an engine. Anthony's chest tightened. For the first time since his mother's illness, since giving up his dreams, he felt seen. Truly seen. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Then let's fix it together." And in front of the very people who had once laughed, Anthony Davies kissed Lauren Howard, sealing not just a deal, but a love that had risen from mockery, humiliation and pride, into redemption, respect and forever. And if you're still watching this, let me ask you one last thing. You just witnessed a billionaire humbled, a mechanic redeemed, and two broken hearts find their way to love. You felt the pain, the betrayal, the triumph. So how could you leave without subscribing? If you watch them fight for each other, you can fight for this channel too. Don't just vanish like one of those investors who doubted Anthony. Subscribe now and be part of every story that proves love can rise from anywhere. Lauren and Anthony's story didn't end in the boardroom. It began there. A mechanic who became a hero. A billionaire who became human. Two hearts who found, against all odds, that love doesn't care about class, titles or pride. In Harriman, New York, people would talk for years about the day the billionaire mocked the mechanic. But Anthony and Lauren, they would remember it as the day love began.